Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Tanchjim Origin. These are a pair of HiFi IEMs, which are the flagship for the company at this moment. It's a brand founded in 2015, and it's often overshadowed by its quote-unquote pseudo-brother Moondrop, which is perhaps more well-known these days for making relatively affordable audiophile-grade products. And these can be thought of as a spiritual successor to the Tanchjim Oxygen, which were a very popular pair for the company back in 2019. It's kind of a back-to-basics approach, because instead of incorporating the latest trends, including planar magnetic drivers or stacking multiple drivers, aka speakers, inside, they are using a single dynamic driver inside, which is 10 millimeters, but Tanchjim claims that by optimizing it through really calculated tuning, closely following the Harman curve, which is described as a target frequency response for headphones that aims to produce the best sound quality for most listeners, based on research experimentation data. That being said, they're still flagship headphones at the end of the day, and they include also interchangeable or modular filters with varying density in the meshes that can also slightly change the sound, providing some degree of variance in emphasizing the mids, trebles, and bass. You can think of it as a hardware-level EQ compared to adjusting it through software only. So the craftsmanship continues to be pretty high-end, which is expected out of their flagship pair that retails for $260. Yes, for non-audiophiles out there, that's sure to raise some eyebrows, but for those in pursuit of the best audio quality possible, again, audiophiles being the main target audience here, it actually is competitive with the landscape of other hi-fi flagship headphones on the market. These IEMs are otherwise crafted out of machined aluminum with modular MMCX style prongs that you can use to attach onto the cable and replace it if it ever breaks down. Here's a closer look at the mesh, as well as a claimed waterproofing filter, as well as a dustproof filter inside as well to improve on the longevity. Tanchjim also touts customizable silicone tips in the packaging to get a more snug fit, reduce fatigue, and supposedly reduce air pressure differences as well, otherwise offering a pretty clean and minimalistic design overall. Now, with the rise in popularity of wireless Bluetooth headphones and TWS-style buds, one can argue that wired IEMs like these are becoming more niche than ever. You really have to be, again, an audiophile or someone that wants to squeeze as much detail as possible out of the sound quality, even if it comes at the cost of convenience and a higher price tag as well. So in a sense, many of these hi-fi products have become almost retro in a way. These manufacturers are really obsessing over hardware-level details, similar to a well-crafted camera where the lens and the optics of the hardware is doing all of the work, as compared to modern smartphones where we have computational photography software processing doing more of the heavy lifting instead. For arguably a smaller crowd that still appreciates products like this, even if it will never become truly mainstream again. Anyways, the packaging here is done in a pretty ornate way. There's an anime-inspired postcard that you also get as an extra. The tuning curve is once again displayed on the back of the packaging, along with all of the claimed specs, with an extremely wide frequency range that should capture plenty of detail, again, especially for a single driver, part of the 5th generation model of drivers that they're using. And on the inside, you'll find a quick user guide outlining how to snap the cable into place, as well as wear the buds with the wire going behind the ear for a more snug fit. And the actual origins are presented in a pretty delicate way, along with the interchangeable meshes. We have 3 in total that you can try out. One is pre-attached, and you can swap it for 2 other densities. What I will say though is it's kind of hard to tell them apart just by looking at the design. It would have been nice if they used different colors, like maybe a red ring or blue ring or yellow ring, to more clearly distinguish between the higher versus lower densities for improved ease of use. And their logo kind of reminds me of a Red Cross or medical sign, so it's quite interesting. And we have the origin on the other side, so it's asymmetrical. Down below here we have the aforementioned silicone tips, although you don't get any foam tips provided with the origin. You can always use your own if desired. And then underneath the other compartment is going to be the carrying case, made out of a vegan leather material, and there's a clasp that also contains the detachable cable, which again uses a standard 3.5mm jack on the other side. Still is extremely shiny. Also note that the default wire that comes included doesn't have a built-in microphone on the stem. You won't be able to use the box set immediately for answering calls or changing the volume controls, which would have been nice to find, I think, by default, but it is what it is. And a closer look at those silicone tips, if you turn them around, we can see they actually have slightly different properties. One side is more of bass enhancing, the other side is going to be more treble enhancing. And the reason for this is due to the differences in shape, as well as the density of the silicone that they're using as well. For example, the bass enhancing set seems to be maybe a little bit more puffy and translucent compared to the treble enhancing set is a little bit more narrow, as you can tell there. So they have definitely created a lot of these modular components in combination with the density of the mesh here as well. Give you that mechanical control over the sound in a more nuanced way, since as an analog pair of headphones, obviously there is no app or software component that they've developed themselves. And a closer look at the design of these IEMs, you definitely feel very premium with some substantial weight due to the full metal housing being employed. Quite a classic look overall. Very shiny though here on the rear, a bit of a fingerprint magnet. And we're able to locate the analog input as well as the, again, mesh here that you can just unscrew. So when popped off, it will look something like this. It's a little bit of a deeper cavity than I was expecting, but generally seems to work well enough. As for the silicone tips, they have a kind of dual layer design, and on the inside fold of the rubber, you also find a T for Tanchjim emblazed inside as well. As far as ergonomics are concerned, they were comfortable. They're definitely not the lightest pair of IEMs I've ever tried. Many of those use a resin or a polycarbonate frame because these are a full aluminum unibody, giving it a bit more of a dense feel. However, because they are using dynamic drivers as compared to a larger cavity maybe needed for planar magnetic or multi-driver setups that require, again, multiple speakers inside, the overall footprint isn't bad. So generally speaking, wearing them for a couple of hours of continuous music listening didn't provide too much stress or strain. As reference, here's a pair of wireless TWS buds, the KZ Carls, which are also quite similar to Apple's AirPods, just to serve as a rough size reference. So not bad in terms of fit and ergonomics, and the cable prevents them from falling out quite as easily as well. Perhaps a little similar to some sports design wireless buds, including the Aerofits from Soundcore that we've seen recently as well, employs kind of similar ergonomics overall. But obviously one is a wireless Bluetooth pair, the other one here still uses an analog cable, since Bluetooth or any wireless transmission is inherently lossy or compressing some of the detail as it's being sent compared to a analog cable can retain the most detail when paired with higher resolution tracks as well as preferably a player that has a higher quality DAC inside as well. Maybe one slight quirk about that included case, which we saw here earlier, is it is a little bit on the larger side. It is well padded on the inside with plenty of velvet filling foam, but I do feel it is a little oversized considering the overall dimensions of the headphones are still very compact, as you can tell there. So the case will take up a little bit more space when you're traveling with it, although it definitely protects and pads the headphones pretty well. Also, what looks like a band-aid is just this adhesive strip that you can use to tie the cables together in a more organized way, which might look something like this. I think this is a little bit strange as well. Would have preferred seeing a maybe Velcro strap instead. That might be a little easier to reuse down the road. But aside from that, overall, a pretty solid presentation. And now moving into the sound quality and performance, thankfully it's not just marketing gimmick, but it is truly a back-to-basics approach for this company, and they are quite impressive sounding. Particularly in the mid-range and trebles, I would say, is where these pairs definitely shine. The mid-range, it's open, spacious, clean, with a forward presentation of vocals. Trebles also are airy and smooth, leading on a brighter side of the sound without adding too much harshness or distortion. It doesn't sound like it's too piercing or screechy, even at higher volume levels still was very pleasant. With that being said, the bass isn't going to cater to bass heads per se. However, it provides a fast and clean bass response. When something hits, you can definitely feel the impact and then it just quickly rolls on without dragging or becoming too murky either. So I definitely did not feel like I was losing out or missing a more aggressive kick in the bass per se, but if you are the type of person that primarily listens to EDM or really aggressive sounding bassy headphones, that is something to keep in mind. These are going to be a little bit more neutral, realistic sounding, and overall it's balanced and clean. In other words, you can expect these IEMs to favor mid-bass over sub-bass, offering a overall still quite nice and full authoritative sound, satisfying enough for guitar-based tracks. So I have to say that Tanchjim's gamble here has paid off because they have been able to target the tuning here in a way which is quite smart and again very calculated, proving that with enough care and attention put into optimizing that single driver, and perhaps with some advances in material science over the past few years, you can still crank out super impressive audio. Reducing the number of components inside should also keep the weight a little bit lower versus some of the alternatives out there. So it goes to show that the 5 generations of time that Tanchjim has had on optimizing these single driver headphones can definitely be felt. These are balanced, mature, and sophisticated sounding, while having a touch of warmth, making it fun but still staying clean when it comes to the audio quality. Another analogy I saw that was fun and perhaps fitting to describe the situation here is if you're looking at competitors like the aforementioned KZ, they often have so many drivers packed into their IEM, sometimes even 5, 10, 15 drivers in extreme cases, responsible for a different audio frequency. For example, one might be dedicated for bass, the other one might be dedicated for mids, another driver inside might be dedicated for trebles. That should also give you a bit more nuanced sound compared to relying on this one speaker tuned extremely well to do all of the lifting. But as a result, you can think of those KZ multi-driver IEMs kind of like getting an expensive burger at a fast food place where the cost of each menu item is lower, so you can buy maybe 5 or 6 burgers, compared to the Origins here are more of a gourmet, fine dining option. It's one plate, but it is presented in a really careful and meticulous way. And yet we end up with a sound quality here in 2025 that is surprisingly not super far apart anymore, and goes to show that their 5 generations of refining the single driver solution has been surprisingly effective. And so after trying these out when it comes to the audio quality and performance, I can definitely say that you won't be disappointed with these, and I can understand why they've been dubbed as perhaps the king of single driver IEMs. And it is a little bit of a shame that this company has been, in some ways, swept under the carpet by its younger siblings, including Moondrop and KZ, which have had significantly more mainstream attention, I would argue, probably because they grab headlines by packing in specs like X number of drivers inside, which on a marketing level just make it seem more impressive. Compared to these kind of being the underdog, it's the quiet one that's in the corner, not necessarily receiving as much attention. But ultimately, when it comes to the performance, these do sound excellent. That being said, no product is perfect, and as we touched on throughout this video, there are a couple of weaknesses. One of them is the nozzles there, the modular components, I don't feel like make the biggest difference in the world, to be completely honest. It's very subtle, and also, again, if they could have labeled them to make it more obvious that one is going to be more bass forward, one is treble forward, on those metal rings visually, it could be nice to see. Also, the casing is going to be a little bit on the larger side in terms of dimensions for the form factor of these IEMs, which are still very compact. Plus, having a cable there can produce a little bit of sound and risk of tangling if you are vigorously moving around. These are really designed for sitting down, really enjoying the audio experience as closely as possible, paired with a higher quality recording. But if you're okay with some of those limitations, then again, the audio quality here remains very detailed, super clean. You can definitely tell a difference compared to even the best wireless TWS style buds when it comes to the level of detail, as well as cleanness just being a notch above. Not to mention the extremely well-designed hardware that you can use for years and years down the road, compared to wireless headphones that have a battery. And as we know from smartphones, batteries are often the first component to fail, making them kind of disposable once the battery deteriorates, compared to a completely analog hardware solution like this can be used for decades down the road, even if it sacrifices on some of the convenience. So you can check out more details if you're interested in something like this, a pretty neat brand in the audiophile space. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the extremely solid sounding single driver flagship IEMs, the Tanchjim Origin.